You're tired of feeling hijacked by other people's words. One comment ruins your mood. One look sets you off. One moment of disrespect follows you for hours, sometimes days. And the worst chapter isn't what they said. It's how much control you handed over without even realizing it. Because every time you get triggered, you pay a price. You lose focus, you lose peace, you lose presence, you lose power. But here's the truth most people never learn. The calmest person in the room is always the most dangerous one. Welcome to this audiobook. This is Stop Getting Triggered. In this audiobook, you're going to learn how to stop caring what people think, how to detach emotionally without becoming cold, and how to stay calm under pressure in a world designed to provoke you. Not by suppressing emotions, not by pretending you don't feel, but by understanding the psychology behind why people get under your skin, and how to take that power back. Because here's the punchline that changes everything. If someone can control your emotions, they control your behavior. And today, that ends. If this message hits you even a little, make a quiet promise to yourself right now. Stay with this audiobook, because the version of you who finishes it will not react the same way ever again. Now let me tell you what this journey will look like. First, we're going to expose why you get triggered in the first place, not in a surface-level way, but at the root. Then, you'll learn how to break the emotional loop that keeps you replaying conversations in your head. After that, we'll build emotional detachment, not as avoidance, but as mastery. And finally, you'll learn how to move through pressure, disrespect, and chaos with a calm that unsettles everyone around you. This is not therapy. This is not motivational fluff. This is emotional discipline. And before we go any further, one thing needs to be clear. This audiobook is for education and self-mastery only. It's not a replacement for professional mental health support. What it is a blueprint for emotional strength in everyday life. Now listen closely. The reason you get triggered has nothing to do with being weak. It has everything to do with being human. Your brain is wired for survival, not peace. It reacts faster than you can think. And most people spend their entire lives reacting instead of responding. Someone disrespects you. Your body tenses. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts race. Before you know it, you're no longer in the present moment. You're in defense mode. And defense mode is where clarity disappears. Here's the problem. The moment you react emotionally, you've already lost leverage. Because reactions are predictable. Calm is not. Think about the last time someone got under your skin. Maybe it was a coworker, a partner, a stranger online, or someone who knows exactly which buttons to push. Notice what happened next. You replayed it. You imagined comebacks. You explained yourself to people who weren't even there. Your mind stayed stuck in that moment long after it passed. Meanwhile, the person who triggered you moved on. That's not strength. That's captivity. And the real danger isn't that you felt something. The danger is that you never questioned why it hit so hard. Because here's a truth that will sting at first, but free you forever. People don't trigger you. They reveal what's already unguarded inside you. Read that again in your mind. Triggers are not attacks. They are signals. Signals pointing to unmet expectations, unhealed wounds, or unconscious attachments. And until you see that clearly, you'll keep blaming the world for reactions that were never really about the moment at all. Most people think emotional control means not caring. That's wrong. Not caring is numbness. Control is awareness. Detachment is not shutting down. Detachment is choosing not to bleed for things that don't deserve your blood. Let me ask you something. Why does one person's opinion ruin your day, while another person's doesn't matter at all? Same words, different impact. That tells you everything. It's not the stimulus, it's the meaning you attach to it. And meaning is programmable. But before we reprogram anything, we need to slow the moment down. Because triggers thrive on speed. They need immediacy. They need you to react before you reflect. That's why the first skill you're going to learn is not emotional control. It's pause. The pause is where power lives. Between what happens and how you respond, there is a gap. Most people never see it. They jump straight from stimulus to reaction. But the strongest individuals train themselves to live inside that gap. That gap is where leaders are made. That gap is where peace begins. That gap is where you stop being predictable. And predictability is what manipulators rely on. Here's a quiet truth. Some people provoke you on purpose. Not because they're strong, but because they're insecure. They want a reaction because reactions feed them significance. When you react, you validate them. When you stay calm, you starve them. Silence, composure, and indifference are not weakness. They are boundaries without explanation, and the moment you realize you don't owe emotional reactions to anyone, you feel lighter. Now let's go deeper. Why does your body react before your mind can catch up? Because your nervous system doesn't care about your social image. It cares about safety. Your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and social threat. Rejection feels like danger. Criticism feels like danger. Embarrassment feels like danger. So your system floods with stress chemicals as if you're under attack. This is why logic fails when you're triggered. This is why just calm down never works. You're not calm because your body thinks it's surviving something. So the solution isn't to shame yourself for reacting. The solution is to retrain your nervous system to recognize when a threat is imaginary. That's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is not about being soft. It's about being precise. You don't need thicker skin. You need clearer boundaries. You don't need to toughen up. You need to stop giving meaning to things that don't earn it. Here's a question that will change how you experience people forever. Does this moment deserve my energy? Not your anger, not your explanation, not your attention, your energy, because energy is finite. And every time you give it to something small, you starve something important. Your goals, your peace, your growth. This audiobook is about reclaiming that energy. If this is already resonating, do something simple. Hit like, not for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself that you're choosing awareness over reaction. And if a specific line hits you later, drop it in the comments. That reflection locks it in. Now here's where most people get stuck. They believe that if they don't react, they're letting people win. That belief is poison. Reacting doesn't protect your dignity. It exposes your wounds. The person who stays calm isn't losing. They're observing. And observers always have the advantage. In the next chapter, we're going to dismantle the myth that reacting equals strength and show you why the most composed people are the ones everyone subconsciously respects. Because once you see how emotional power actually works, you'll never rush to react again. And that's where things start to get dangerous, for the chaos around you. Chapter 2. There is a lie we were all taught early, that if you don't react, you're weak. That if you don't defend yourself immediately, you're losing. That silence means submission. But the truth is the opposite. Reaction is easy. Anyone can explode. Anyone can argue. Anyone can justify, explain, defend, raise their voice, fire back. That takes no discipline. Restraint does. Power is not loud. Power is not frantic. Power is not desperate to be understood. Power is still. The moment you understand this, something shifts inside you. Because when someone tries to provoke you, what they're really doing is testing one thing. Can I control you? And the second you react on impulse, the answer becomes yes. Think about it. If someone can change your mood with a sentence, if they can hijack your focus with a look, if they can ruin your peace with an opinion, then who's really in charge? This is why emotional discipline matters more than emotional expression. Expression without control is just leakage. Control without awareness is repression. We're building something different here. We're building command. Let me tell you something most people never hear. The person who angers you controls you. The person who unsettles you trains you. The person who triggers you owns the remote to your nervous system. And until you take that remote back, you're always on someone else's channel. Now let's talk about why certain people get under your skin more than others. Because it's never random. You're not equally reactive to everyone. Some voices slide right past you, others hit like a blade. Why? Because triggers attach to identity. When someone touches something you're unsure about, your system reacts violently. Criticism hurts when you're already doubting yourself. Disrespect stings when you're craving validation. Dismissal burns when you feel unseen. Triggers expose attachment. Attachment to being right. Attachment to being liked. Attachment to being respected. Attachment to being understood. And attachment always creates vulnerability. Here's a quiet question to sit with. What are you trying to protect every time you react? Your ego will say, my dignity. Your awareness will say, my insecurity. That's not an insult. That's insight. Because once you see the attachment, you can loosen it. Most people don't realize this, but emotional freedom doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from releasing internal dependencies. The need to be approved, the need to be praised, the need to be agreed with. Those needs turn strangers into threats. Let me be clear. You don't need to stop caring. You need to stop outsourcing your self-worth. When your worth depends on reactions, you'll always be reactive. But when your worth is internal, other people's behavior becomes information, not a verdict. This is where detachment begins. Not apathy, not coldness, perspective. Detachment means you observe without absorbing. Someone is rude. You notice it. You don't internalize it. Someone criticizes you. You evaluate it. You don't become it. Someone misunderstands you. You allow it. You don't chase correction. Because here's a truth that will save you years of emotional exhaustion. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. Most people waste energy trying to correct perceptions that were never built on truth to begin with. They explain, they defend, they clarify, they justify, all while bleeding attention. The strongest people understand something different. Not every misunderstanding needs resolution. Not every accusation needs a response. Not every opinion needs engagement. Silence is not avoidance when it's intentional. It's selection. Selection of where your energy goes. Ask yourself this the next time you feel triggered. Will engaging here improve my life, or just my ego? That question alone can stop 90% of unnecessary emotional battles. Now let's talk about pressure. Pressure is where triggers multiply. Deadlines, authority figures, public scrutiny, high stakes. Under pressure, your emotional habits reveal themselves. If you've trained reaction, you react. If you've trained awareness, you respond. The psychology is simple. Under stress, the brain defaults to pattern. So if your pattern is defensiveness, that's what shows up. If your pattern is composure, that's what emerges. This is why calm under pressure is not personality. It's training. And training starts with slowing your internal tempo. Triggers speed you up. Heart rate rises. Breathing shortens. Thoughts narrow. Your first job is to interrupt speed. Slow breath, relax jaw, drop shoulders. This isn't spiritual, it's biological. A calm body sends a signal of safety to the brain, and a brain that feels safe can think. Here's a practice. When something triggers you, don't respond for 10 seconds. Not to be polite, to be strategic. 10 seconds feels like an eternity to an impulsive mind. But in those seconds, chemistry shifts. Adrenaline fades, clarity returns, and suddenly, you have options. Options are power. Without options, you react. With options, you choose. And choice is the definition of freedom. Now listen carefully. People who try to trigger you are often unconscious. They're not villains. They're mirrors. They project, they poke, they provoke. Because chaos recognizes chaos. But when you stop reacting, something interesting happens. They get confused. Because their script depends on your response. No response breaks the loop. Calm disarms manipulation. Not because it's superior, but because it's unpredictable. Most people expect emotion. Few expect stillness. And stillness has weight. If this perspective is landing, pause for a moment. Notice how your body feels as you listen. Is there less tension, more space? That's what emotional mastery feels like. Not excitement, stability. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the hardest chapter of detachment, letting go of the need to be understood, because that need keeps more people trapped than anger ever does. And once you release it, your peace stops being negotiable. Chapter 3. There is one addiction more dangerous than anger, the need to be understood. Most people don't realize this is what keeps them reactive. They don't want peace. They want validation. They want the other person to finally get it, to see their side, to admit they were wrong, to acknowledge the hurt. And as long as that need exists, You are emotionally negotiable. Because the moment someone misunderstands you, dismisses you, or reduces you to a version you don't recognize, something inside you tightens. You feel the urge to explain, to correct, to defend your character. That urge feels noble, but it's a trap. Because here's the hard truth. Being misunderstood is not a threat to your identity, unless you let it be. Think about how much energy you've wasted trying to be seen correctly. Long messages, carefully worded explanations, replaying conversations in your head, imagining how you should have said it. And how often did it actually bring peace? Rarely. Most of the time, it made things worse. Because the person who misunderstands you is usually not looking for clarity. They're looking for control. And the moment you chase their understanding, you give it to them. Let this land. You do not need to be understood to be grounded. You do not need agreement to be stable. You do not need validation to be whole. Those are dependencies, and dependencies create triggers. Detachment begins when you realize this. Other people's perceptions are not your responsibility. That doesn't mean you become careless. It means you become selective. You speak clearly, you act with integrity, and then you release the outcome. If someone chooses to misunderstand you after that, that's information, not an emergency. Most emotional exhaustion comes from trying to manage other people's interpretations. You can't. And the sooner you stop trying, the calmer you become. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Why do insults hurt more when they're true? Or almost true? Because triggers latch onto self-doubt. When someone hits a chapter of you that's unresolved, the reaction is instant. That's not weakness, that's a signal. Signals are invitations to strengthen something. Instead of asking, why did they say that? Ask, why did that land? This question shifts you from victim to observer, and observers learn. Here's a powerful reframe. Every trigger is a teacher, if you're willing to listen instead of react. Anger says, protect. Awareness says, investigate. When you investigate, you grow. When you react, you repeat. Let's talk about emotional loops. Triggers don't end when the moment ends. They echo. You replay the scene. You imagine different responses. You argue with ghosts. This is where most people lose their peace. Not in the event, but in the aftermath. Your body has already left the moment, but your mind hasn't. That's because your system never closed the loop. Closure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from resolution inside yourself. Here's how you close the loop. Name what actually happened. Without story. Not, they disrespected me, but they raised their voice. Not, they tried to humiliate me, but they made a comment. Story fuels emotion. Observation dissolves it. Then ask this. What meaning did I attach? Did I assume intent? Did I assume disrespect? Did I assume rejection? Meaning is optional. Most people never realize that. They treat meaning like fact, but meaning is a choice, often an unconscious one. When you separate event from meaning, intensity drops. Now let's go deeper. Why do some people seem impossible to trigger? It's not because nothing affects them. It's because they don't personalize randomness. They understand something crucial. People act from their own internal weather, their stress, their insecurity, their history, their unmet needs. Most behavior is self-expression, not commentary on you. When someone snaps, it's rarely about you. When someone criticizes, it's often projection. When someone disrespects, it usually reflects inner chaos. Taking everything personally is emotional narcissism, believing everything revolves around you. Detachment is humility. It says, this isn't about me, and that realization alone is calming. Let me give you a simple mental shift. Instead of asking, why are they doing this to me? Ask, what state are they in? This creates distance. Distance creates clarity. Clarity creates choice. Choice creates peace. Now, there's something important we need to address. Detachment does not mean tolerating disrespect. It means responding without losing yourself. You can set boundaries calmly. You can walk away without drama. You can say no without explanation. The calm boundary is the strongest one because it doesn't need emotion to enforce it. Anger feels powerful, but it burns out. Calm is sustainable. If you've ever watched someone stay composed while others spiral, you've felt it. That gravity, that authority. It's not confidence, it's regulation. A regulated nervous system doesn't get hijacked, and regulation is a skill, one you're building right now. If this is shifting something in you, take a moment. Notice what you're no longer gripping. That lightness? That's detachment. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about emotional bait, the subtle ways people hook your attention, and how to stop biting. Because once you see the bait, you'll never snap at the hook again. Chapter 4. Most people don't realize they're being baited. Not loudly, not aggressively, subtly. A tone, a pause, a look, a sarcastic comment disguised as a joke, a message left unread, a passive-aggressive sentence that leaves just enough ambiguity to make your mind spin. That's emotional bait. And bait only works if you bite. Here's the pattern. Someone feels insecure, threatened, bored, or powerless. So they throw out a hook, not to communicate, but to provoke. They want a reaction because reactions give them leverage. Attention, control, confirmation. The moment you feel that surge, the urge to respond immediately, to correct, to fire back, that's the hook setting. And most people bite without even seeing it. But once you see the bait, you gain a new option. You can decline. Let me say something clearly. Not reacting is not losing. It's refusing to play a rigged game. People who bait others rely on predictability. They expect emotion. They expect defense. They expect engagement. Calm confuses them, because calm doesn't feed the cycle. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you. What did they gain when you reacted? Energy, focus, time. What did you gain? Nothing. That imbalance is the trap. Now here's a shift that changes everything. Instead of asking, how should I respond? Ask, what happens if I don't? Most of the time, the answer is surprising. Nothing happens. The world doesn't end. Your reputation doesn't collapse. Your dignity doesn't evaporate. The tension dissolves because it was never sustained by truth, only by engagement. Silence is not absence. Silence is signal. It says, this doesn't qualify for my energy. And qualification is power. Let's talk about social pressure. Group settings, work environments, family dynamics. These are fertile grounds for triggers. Because expectations are unspoken, roles are assumed, history is layered. Someone says something loaded, and suddenly you're reacting to 10 years of backstory. Here's the discipline. Respond to the moment, not the memory. Most emotional overreactions come from accumulated resentment, not the present interaction. You're not angry at what was said. You're angry at everything that was never addressed. That's why the intensity feels disproportionate. Detachment teaches you to separate past from present. This moment is just this moment. Nothing more. You don't need to carry the archive into every interaction. That weight is optional. Now, an important distinction. Detachment is not avoidance. Avoidance is fear-based. Detachment is choice-based. Avoidance runs. Detachment stands still. You're not afraid to engage. You're selective about when it's worth it. That selectivity creates respect. People sense it. They feel when they can't push your buttons easily. And when they can't, they stop trying. Or escalate. Escalation is revealing. It shows desperation for reaction. That's when you know you're doing it right. Let's talk about escalation. When you stop reacting, some people will push harder. Louder comments, sharper words, more obvious provocation. This is extinction behavior. They're losing access to the reward, your reaction, so they increase intensity to get it back. Most people cave here. They think, now I really have to respond. But this is the moment where mastery is forged. If you stay calm here, the behavior collapses. Because without payoff, it can't sustain itself. Silence plus consistency equals freedom. Now let's go internal. What about the triggers no one sees? The internal ones, the thoughts that attack you, the comparisons, the self-criticism, the imagined judgments. You can detach from people. But what about your own mind? Here's the truth. Your mind baits you too. It throws hooks. What if they think you're weak? You should have said more. That made you look stupid. You can't let that slide. These thoughts feel urgent. They feel authoritative. But they are not commands. They are suggestions. And you don't have to accept them. Detachment applies inward as much as outward. You observe the thought without becoming it. You don't argue with it. You don't suppress it. You let it pass. Just like a comment from someone who doesn't know you. This is emotional maturity, not reacting to every internal stimulus. Because if you're constantly reacting to your own thoughts, you'll always be at war. Peace comes when you stop answering every mental knock at the door. Now pause for a second. Feel the difference between reacting and observing. One is tense, the other is spacious. That space is where peace lives. And peace is not passive. It's powerful. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that changes how people treat you almost instantly. The quiet authority of emotional consistency. Because when people realize they can't shake you, they start to see you differently. And that's where the balance of power shifts. Chapter 5. There is a kind of authority that doesn't come from titles, volume, or intimidation. It comes from consistency, emotional consistency. When your reactions don't spike, when your tone doesn't swing wildly, when your presence doesn't change based on who walks into the room. People feel that, and when people feel it, they adjust. Most humans are unconsciously scanning for instability. They test, they poke, they probe. Not because they're evil, but because unpredictability feels unsafe. When someone realizes they can't shake you, something subtle happens. They stop trying to control you. They start respecting you. Not because you demanded it, but because your nervous system told the truth before your words ever did. This is why emotional regulation is leadership. Even in personal relationships, even in silence. Let's talk about respect for a moment. Respect doesn't come from defending yourself loudly. It comes from being unmovable quietly. People don't respect those they can easily manipulate emotionally. They respect those who don't need to prove anything. That's why the calmest person often holds the most power, even if no one says it out loud. Now here's something important. Consistency does not mean suppressing emotion. It means processing it privately instead of performing it publicly. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to reflect. You are allowed to be affected. You just don't have to leak it everywhere. Most people confuse authenticity with emotional exposure, but true authenticity is alignment, not reactivity. You don't need to broadcast your inner world to validate it. You honor it by regulating it. This is how emotional maturity looks from the inside. You feel the surge, and you breathe. You notice the impulse, and you pause. You sense the story forming, and you don't feed it. That's not repression. That's command. Let me tell you something that will change how you handle confrontation. You don't need to match energy. Matching energy is how chaos spreads. You need to set energy. When someone comes in heated, your calm becomes the contrast. And contrast creates dominance. Not dominance over them, dominance over yourself. And self-dominance is the only kind that lasts. Now let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are often misunderstood. People think boundaries require confrontation. They don't. Most boundaries are enforced by behavior, not explanation. You stop responding immediately. You stop over-explaining. You stop engaging in dynamics that drain you, and you do it calmly. No speeches, no justifications, no emotional monologues. The quieter the boundary, the stronger it is. Because it doesn't ask for permission. It simply is. Here's a powerful reframe. Every time you over-explain, you're asking for approval. Every time you stay calm and brief, you're asserting clarity. Clarity doesn't need defense. Now let's address something many people fear. What if staying calm makes people think I don't care? Good. Let them. People who equate calm with weakness are revealing something about themselves. They're used to chaos. They're comfortable in emotional volatility. Your stability threatens that, and that's not your problem. You don't need to correct people's interpretations of your composure. Let results speak. Let consistency speak. Let time speak. Now let's talk about pressure situations. Moments where you're watched, evaluated, judged. Meetings, arguments, high-stakes conversations. This is where most people abandon regulation. They speed up, they overtalk, they interrupt, they defend preemptively. But here's the truth. Under pressure, less is more. Slower speech, fewer words, more silence. Silence makes people reveal themselves. When you're quiet, others fill the space. They talk more. They expose intentions. They show insecurity. You gather information. Information is leverage. This is not manipulation. This is awareness. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. And seeing changes everything. Now pause and reflect. Think of someone who never seems rattled, not cold, not distant, just steady. Notice how you feel around them. Safer, more careful, more respectful. That's the effect of regulation. You can cultivate that, not by copying their behavior, but by training your nervous system. And training happens in small moments. Every time you choose pause over reaction. Every time you choose silence over defense. Every time you choose clarity over chaos. Those moments compound. They rewire you. If you've stayed with this audiobook so far, you're already changing. You may not feel it dramatically. That's good. Real shifts feel quiet. In the next chapter, we're going to confront the hardest truth of all. Why some chapter of you likes being triggered. Because once you understand that, you finally stop feeding it. Chapter 6. Here's a truth that most people resist at first. Some chapter of you gets something from being triggered. Not consciously, not proudly, but emotionally. Triggers can feel familiar. They can feel energizing. They can even feel validating. Because reacting gives you a role. The offended one, the righteous one, the misunderstood one, the strong one who doesn't let things slide. And roles feel safe. They give identity. So when you start letting go of reactions, something strange happens. You feel exposed. Because without the reaction, who are you? This is where real growth begins. Most people cling to their triggers because those triggers prop up a self-image. I'm passionate. I just care deeply. I don't tolerate disrespect. But look closer. Is it passion? Or is it compulsion? Is it self-respect? Or is it insecurity wearing armor? Emotional maturity asks uncomfortable questions, and one of them is this. Who would I be without my triggers? Calmer, yes, but also quieter. Less dramatic, less fueled. And for some people that feels like loss, because chaos can feel like aliveness, but peace feels unfamiliar at first. This is why detachment can feel empty in the beginning. Not because something is missing, but because something noisy finally left. And in that silence, you meet yourself. Without adrenaline, without stories, without reaction, just awareness. That's why so many people run back to drama. Drama fills space, but growth requires space. Let's talk about identity. If your identity is built around reacting, defending, proving, or correcting, then calm will feel like erasure. But calm doesn't erase you, it reveals you. Stripped of reflex, stripped of habit, stripped of performance. What remains is presence, and presence is powerful. Presence doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. Now let's address something practical. What do you do after you don't react? Because not reacting doesn't mean nothing happens inside. You still feel, you still process, you just do it differently, privately, deliberately, without bleeding on the situation. Here's a practice. After a triggering moment, don't analyze immediately. Let the body settle first. Walk, breathe, hydrate, then reflect with precision. What happened? What did I feel? What meaning did I assign? What chapter of me felt threatened? This is not self-criticism. This is self-mastery. You're training your system to discharge emotion without turning it into behavior. That's regulation. And regulation is freedom. Now let's talk about people who try harder when you stop reacting. They escalate, They guilt, they accuse you of being distant, cold, or changed. This is where many people fold. They don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want to appear uncaring. But listen carefully. When you change, the old dynamics protest. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the system is recalibrating. Some people benefited from your reactivity, from your explanations, from your emotional availability, from your predictability. When that supply ends, discomfort appears, not your responsibility. You're not here to manage other people's comfort with your growth. Now let's address empathy. Detachment does not kill empathy. It purifies it. Empathy without boundaries is self-abandonment. Empathy with boundaries is compassion. You can understand someone's pain without absorbing it. You can acknowledge someone's emotion without carrying it. That's emotional adulthood. You stop confusing responsibility with responsibility for others. You are responsible for your behavior, not for regulating everyone else's emotions. This distinction alone can end decades of emotional fatigue. Now pause. Notice how much lighter that feels. You're not cold, you're clear. And clarity is kindness, especially to yourself. If this audiobook is shifting something, let this moment mark it. This is where many people turn back. They prefer familiar chaos over unfamiliar peace. But if you stay, the calm becomes natural. The silence becomes comfortable. The triggers lose their grip. In the next chapter, we're going to bring everything together. How to live in a world full of noise without becoming noise yourself. How to move forward calm, focused, and unbothered. Because the goal is not to avoid life. The goal is to move through it untouched by what doesn't matter. And that's where real inner peace begins. Chapter 7. Here is where everything comes together. Because emotional mastery is not about hiding from the world. It's about moving through it untouched by what doesn't deserve you. The goal was never to become unfeeling. The goal was to become unhookable. To live in a noisy world without becoming noise. Most people spend their lives reacting to whatever crosses their path. A comment, a headline, a message, a look. They live externally paced, pulled, pushed, jerked around by stimuli they never chose. Detachment flips the direction. You become internally paced. You decide when something matters. You decide when something gets access. You decide when something deserves response. And that decision is where peace lives. Now let's talk about daily life. Because mastery isn't proven in theory. It's proven in repetition. You will still encounter disrespect. You will still face criticism. You will still be misunderstood. The difference is not the absence of triggers. The difference is the absence of surrender. When something happens now, you don't ask, how do I react? You ask, what is required here? Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes it's a boundary. Sometimes it's walking away. Sometimes it's a calm, direct sentence. No emotion attached. Response replaces reaction, and response always preserves dignity. Here's a rule that simplifies everything. If it costs you peace, it's too expensive. An argument that steals your focus, a debate that drains your energy, a relationship that thrives on volatility. Too expensive. Your nervous system doesn't care about being right. It cares about safety, and peace is safety. Now let's talk about confidence. True confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't defend itself constantly. It doesn't chase agreement. Confident people don't rush to prove. They let time and consistency do the talking. That's why detachment increases confidence. Because when you're no longer desperate for reaction, approval, or validation, you stand taller without trying. And people feel it. Not because you changed your personality, but because you stopped leaking energy. Now here's something important. Detachment does not mean isolation. It means discernment. You still connect deeply with the right people. You still open up in safe spaces. You still care without self-betrayal. You stop trying to be understood by everyone. And in doing so, you finally are understood by those who matter. This is emotional efficiency. Not everyone gets access. And access is earned through consistency, not entitlement. Let me say something that may sting, but it's freeing. Some people only know how to relate through conflict. When you stop reacting, they don't know how to connect anymore. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the relationship was built on chaos, not compatibility. Peace reveals truth. It shows you who thrives when you're calm, and who only shows up when you're reactive. That information is priceless. Now let's talk about self-trust. Every time you don't react, you build it. You prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort without exploding. You prove that you don't need to be carried by emotion. You prove that you're capable of pause. And pause is maturity. Over time, something shifts. Triggers feel slower. The space between stimulus and response widens. Your inner voice gets quieter, not silent, clear. And clarity is the opposite of chaos. If you've made it this far, pause for a moment. Think back to how you used to react, how quickly things used to hijack you. Now notice the distance. That distance is growth. Even if it's subtle, even if it's new. Now here's a powerful practice to carry forward.